Well, hello. Today I'm going to speak to you about the mechanisms of obesity. So there's multiple mechanisms involved, and people are so unique. Just like you have your own fingerprint, you need to be analyzed in a very unique way so that you can have the best outcome. What you want is sustainability and lifestyle changes that are going to promote longevity and quality of life. So first I'm going to speak about the hormonal component. So one thing to look at with obesity is the thyroid. The thyroid has 24 different patterns that it can be abnormal or not perfect. And so in order to analyze this information, we really should do a full thyroid panel. And I practically have never seen that done in the entire time I've practiced by other clinicians. So let's talk about what that looks like. You should look at your thyroid stimulating hormone, which is what every doctor looks at. But then there's lots of other things you should look at. You should also look at reverse T3, T3 uptake, free T3, total T3, T4 total, and free T4, as well as TPO and thyroglobulin antibodies. This combination makes the full thyroid panel. You also should look at adrenal function. You should look at the cortisol, and sometimes you can look at DHEA, and there's sometimes other things that you can also look at with the adrenals. But the adrenal gland and the thyroid are two things that usually are not properly addressed for weight loss. The next thing I'll tell you about is human growth hormone. We see with obese people that they usually don't have enough human growth hormone, and there's really amazing ways that we can change that. One of them, of course, is lowering sugar intake or high glycemic foods, as well as increasing your protein, increasing your ability to sleep, exercise, particularly really rapid exercise. So like if you get a punching bag and you start boxing that thing, that will help. Also, fasting is incredibly important for this, and then anything that increases your GABA, which is a neurotransmitter to the brain, also will help with human growth hormone. Then we also have to look at sex hormones. So generally speaking, with obese males, we see that they don't have enough testosterone and they have too much estrogen. Oftentimes they start developing breasts as well. And then with females, we see increased sex hormone binding globulin, increased testosterone, decreased progesterone, and sometimes estrogen can be high or low, but it's something that we should look at because it's different for every person. Also, we should be looking at insulin resistance. If a person has insulin resistance, they can still have very healthy glucose levels and hemoglobin A1C. That's why, like I said, every person's unique. So if you have insulin resistance, though, usually, but not always, you'll have a protruding abdomen, and the larger that it is, the more insulin resistance that you have. So what we have to do is, for this, we have to cut out alcohol, we have to cut out sugar, and high glycemic foods. So at some point I'll speak to you about a list of high glycemic foods so that you can be cognizant of that information. In the labs, what we see is usually high LDL, which is the bad cholesterol. Sometimes the total cholesterol will be high. We do see high triglycerides quite often, and of course if you have elevated fasting glucose or elevated hemoglobin A1C, this also is insulin resistant. So another very interesting phenomenon is inflammation. So inflammation can make you gain weight, but if you have excess weight, it makes you become inflamed. So there's a horrible cycle that goes back and forth between inflammation and obesity. So you have to break that cycle. You have to, if you want to make a long-term change, you really have to quit eating foods that make you have inflammation, and then you really just need to get that whole process turned around. So what we usually see with blood work is elevated ferritin or elevated C-reactive protein or elevated erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and this is what we usually see. And these are some very good indicators. There's other labs as well that we can look at, but those are probably the most common ones that I look at in my clinic. Also, the old idea that, you know, we just eat too much compared to the amount of calories that we burn, that's also another factor, and that's a true fact. So, but when you work on a solution, you want to work on it from different directions. It's the idea that you just go and lose your 5 pounds or your 20 pounds and then just go back to whatever you did before that created it all. It's just a really bad way to manage your weight. So let's talk about the solutions. The solutions are, of course, the most important of all. So one solution is, if you go on a vacation, pack a cooler. Make it full of the foods that you know you should be eating, so you're not eating things that are going to make you fall off of your program. If you have to fly somewhere and you can't pack a cooler, then just do the best you can, and when you come back, make sure that you're right on track with what you were doing before you left. Also, for holidays, you should definitely celebrate holidays, but every holiday is full of bad food. So, really, if you can plan well, you don't have to eat all that stuff. Also, for social functions, let's say that you go to a certain club on a regular basis, or you are involved in a religious function on a regular basis. Just let people know, look, I'm going to work on my health. I'm not going to eat the stuff that I usually eat. And you might inspire some other people. Maybe they will also become healthier like you. And then if you're going to go to a restaurant, don't actually just demand that they carry items that are healthy, that are going to promote longevity, rather than things that make people sick. Because the reason why they sell that stuff is because you buy it. Also, another solution is intermittent fasting. It's probably the most important solution of all. Intermittent fasting is going to do the most for you of all things. So the reality is that if we gain all this weight, it's because we have genes that allow us to gain this weight, and those genes are to protect us from famines. But if we don't have any famines, then we need to take a break from eating sometimes. That's exactly what makes our body improve. Also, a lot of people talk about having a ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diets do help, but they have very short-lived results. So they work for a period of time and then they just stop working. So, but if you incorporate the idea of not eating so much sugar in your diet, or high glycemic foods that are going to quickly become sugar once you eat them, then this makes it work even better. So if you combine that with intermittent fasting, you get way better results. Also, you should be on an anti-inflammatory diet. There's general anti-inflammatory diets, and then there's very specific things that can make one person inflamed that don't usually make them inflamed. For example, somebody might react to broccoli. Even though broccoli is generally an anti-inflammatory food, you should find out if you react to certain things that are unexpected. And there is a very good food sensitivity test that we can find that information out. We test lots of foods, probably 500 foods. So if you're interested in doing that, we can do that, because that would help you with weight loss as well. Also, lowering your calories is another thing that you should consider. There's some really good apps. There's one called Calorie King that you can download, and there's other ones. You can check them out, and then start watching your calories, and make sure on these things you can put in your weight, your age, your gender, etc., your activity level, and then they'll tell you, okay, if you want to lose 1 pound a week or 2 pounds a week, which, by the way, is what I recommend with your health, is that you lose 1 to 2 pounds a week. Then it kind of helps you do that with just calories by itself. When you combine that with, not eating high glycemic foods and intermittent fasting, then you really got something good going. Another thing that's also very important to think about is accountability. Because if you start something, you want to be around people that promote that idea. So if you're going to be around people that kind of put it aside and say, this is why would you do this? Or, you got to put yourself in an environment where it's going to be easier and that you're also going to get retested. You want to get your labs retested on a regular basis so that you know you're moving in the right direction, but you just want to make sure you're accountable. So, work with your spouse, work with your friend, work with somebody that it's going to make you more likely to follow through and stay that way. Also, you do want to be getting exercise. The best exercise, in my opinion, is walking. I recommend walking an hour a day for 5 days a week. Although, you can choose what you want. If your joints can't handle it, go swimming. But just understand that swimming, if you look at all the mammals that live in the water, they all have a big layer of fat. So if you want to, it's very healthy for your circulation, and it will get rid of the marbling in the meat, if you want to call it, and it will separate the fat from the muscle. But if you want to feel like you're trimming down, there's better exercises. There's weight-bearing exercises that would probably be better. But it is still very healthy for you to go swimming. Also, we should be addressing whatever adrenal or thyroid issues there are so that you can have the best outcome. So you should probably be on some supplements. Also, another thing to consider is going to an addiction program. I think there's something called Overeaters Anonymous. You can find out about that, see if your local hospital has any recommendations. But you can also do things for addiction as well, like hypnotherapy. Sometimes that really helps when you have emotional eating, because a lot of times people eat when they're bored, they eat when they're happy, they eat when they're sad, they eat when they're hungry, or there's a celebration. Sometimes the first thing they do is they just go to food. But you can also work on doing things to improve your ability to make dopamine. When you make dopamine, this particular neurotransmitter, it does help you with addictions. And you want to drive the frontal lobe so that you have the ability to control yourself better and not be thinking about this thing all the time, thinking about food all the time. Also, another very interesting concept that I think is spot on and has very much validity is working on the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is the part of your brain that controls your appetite. And it controls many, many other things, which we'll talk about in the future. But we can affect the hypothalamus with eyes. So when we do eye exercises, that will fire into the cerebellum, and then that fires into the nucleus tractus solitarius, which is in the pons, which fires directly into the hypothalamus. We can actually affect your appetite, because people that are overweight usually don't have enough leptin, and they have too much ghrelin, which are the two hormones involved in feeling like you're full or feeling like you're hungry. So anyway, I hope that that's helpful, and I will give you another lecture in the next week. Thank you very much.